We're almost there. There's just one final section to explore, the Council's recommendations for how to fix things. One more time, engagement, cooperation, and enforcement. The trifecta of what's needed for this licensing regime to work. Recommendation 1 is a massive increase in police and council resources. That's the enforcement part. We'll let the council argue against themselves here. As they already stated, additional partnership action relating to the compliance and enforcement of this regime will continue. However, this will be subject to other policing priorities not taking precedence, and this approach is unlikely to be sustainable in the long term. Why unsustainable? Well, already Westminster is the most dangerous borough per capita in London, with 298 crimes per 1,000 people. That's 260% higher than the national crime rate. Already back in 2017, the Metropolitan Police was accused of giving shoplifters the green light after stating it was going to ignore most cases of low-level crime. Since then, the rental and cost of living crises have hit hard. These kinds of crimes have increased, meaning that the police simply don't have the resources needed to add to their workload. As the report stated, the police were approached to support our officers in undertaking their role. Whilst these requests were made, the police had other significant priorities that took precedence over the enforcement of illegal buskers. In fact, the report even claims that council officers told police officers that buskers had physically threatened them, and still the police refused to act. In other words, criminals who are refusing to stop committing an actual crime and who have physically threatened council officers while in the middle of committing that crime could still not motivate the police to act. That is how little regard the police have for the new regime. I mean, of course, they don't care that Covent Garden is still going on like it has done for centuries, and nowhere in the 114 pages of this report do the authors describe why or how that opinion would change. And to make matters worse, just a couple of weeks ago, the news was reporting that Suella Braverman has demanded that the police stop twiddling their thumbs and begin investigating every theft. Well, unless the council rebrands street performances as theft, this would appear to make police enforcement even less likely. A side point here is that Westminster has inadvertently turned street performance into the borough's most commonly committed crime. None of the street performers on the West Piazza and Magic Corner have licenses. Therefore, each of their shows is a crime. Just those two pitches account for about 8,000 crimes a year. Add all the crimes committed by all the other buskers on all the other pitches in Westminster, and, well, the already saturated crime rate in Westminster looks like it just got a lot worse. This leads to an interesting question. If individual buskers are flagrantly committing hundreds of crimes per year, in the same locations, in broad daylight, in the centre of the busiest parts of town, on a constant schedule, and if they are even announcing their intention to commit said crimes in advance with the line, "It's showtime," why aren't more of them in jail? And, well, what was the point of this again? The 2023 report does not mention how much the council has actually spent on this, which should worry any councillor. But we can do some quick maths. First, the report claims that the processing and determining of each application cost the council £200. In 2022-23, they processed 514 applications, which, according to their estimate, must have cost them around £100,000. Then there's the PRS licence to pay. Unfortunately for Westminster, the local authority's busking pitch licence fee has just been increased to £13.12. Multiply that by 26 pitches, 365 days per year, and you get £125,000. Combined, just those two figures come to over £227,000. That's already 5 times the predicted operational cost. That figure doesn't include the enforcement or monitoring costs of the licensing program, nor does it include how much the council spends on responding to thousands of noise complaints a year, nor the meetings with key stakeholders, the public consultations, the data reviews, the writing of 114-page reports, or the council debates and all the other related costs. Worse still is the fact that the report repeatedly asks the council to significantly increase its budget. The council needs to, quote, evaluate the cost and resource implications of addressing persistent non-compliant and illegal buskers, requiring a significant investment in resources and costs, as well as ongoing support from the police to achieve. And to actively address the issues, there will be a need for significant council and police resources over a prolonged time. How do they want to pay for this? By raising the application fees for new licenses. Now, I feel it's important to mention that in the initial report back in 2020, the council estimated that setup costs would come to £73,500 and annual operational costs would be £43,985. Of that, they expected to earn just £2,400 a year in licence application fees. That's 5.5% of their expected costs. In 2020, this was fine. The council admitted that in order to not erect a financial barrier, fees must be kept low. But in the 2023 report, the first mention describes them as low licence fees, but then as very low fees, and then extremely low, preparing the councillors for their recommendation that the fees be increased. Okay, so let's go through the logic of increasing the cost of the licence. The council thinks that there are good buskers and bad buskers. The good buskers get a licence and play by the rules. According to the report, there are little to no issues with buskers that comply with the licensing requirements in the policy. The good buskers pay their £20 application fee, which is low enough not to be a financial barrier. The bad buskers don't get a licence. Those bad buskers require more enforcement, meaning more money, which the council wants to get by increasing the fees. Oops, they've just created a financial barrier, so fewer buskers get a licence. That's not to say fewer buskers busk, of course, there are just fewer that bother getting a licence. Fewer buskers in the good pile means that there are more buskers in the bad pile, again increasing the enforcement costs. Will the council increase the fees even higher? Also, does the council not care that it will be charging the good people for the actions of the bad people? On to recommendation 3. Make pitch markings more durable and add information in Braille. Great. 4. Remove amplification from Leicester Square. If they did this, Westminster's amplified acts would be limited to Covent Garden for circle shows and a single licensed amplified pitch in Trafalgar Square for hundreds of musicians and dancers to split between them. Does that sound like anyone would bother signing up for a license if that was the case? 5. Let buskers know about pitch closures. Literally the least they could do. 6. Implement the forum, but excluding the SPAs or key stakeholders. 7. Remove current SPAs from being mentioned in the policy. 8. Add a section for hypothetical future SPAs to list contact details. We've just covered this. The report is proposing a massive decrease in cooperation between the council and current street performers associations to improve matters. 9. Adding text to the policy advising that buskers should probably get a PRS license. As mentioned earlier, this is, in legal terms, many layers of stupid. 10. Telling buskers to cooperate even more with officers and the police. Sure. And telling them not to lie on their application forms. Okay, sure. And updating the code of conduct to include those last 2 points. 13, my favourite recommendation, the lose your license if you don't rat on your friends and hey don't insult me clauses. 14, buskers under the age of 18 must have parental consent. This is a weird addition considering that the council doesn't seem to have made the case that this is anything more than a hypothetical problem. And to round off this unsurprising bunch with 3 nondescript recommendations, assessing pitch locations, presumably to write about in a later report, keeping the license conditions under review, and making any other minor or non-consequential amendments. That's 1 suggestion that's unlikely to increase enforcement, 6 that will decrease cooperation and engagement, and 10 items that I bet not even the report's authors could remember if pressed. It is emphasised that little, if anything, would be likely to change, even if the council accepted all 17 of these pointless and petty recommendations. This scheme was implemented so badly it was doomed to fail from the start. The current council has inherited a shambles from the previous one, and the scheme should just be scrapped. It's time to work with your local street performers to find something that isn't just a pointless money sink. Get rid of this licensing scheme and enlist the help of the SPAs.